If everything goes to plan, it looks like Mark Pope is about to pick up the first five-star commitment of his coaching career.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be discussing five-star Jasper Johnson nearing his commitment, less than 24 hours away from him choosing a school. Why do we think it will be the Kentucky Wildcats? We'll break that down on today's episode, as well as take a look at what Kentucky's potential 2025 recruiting class could be. Also on today's episode, five-star power forward Chris Cenac has taken an official visit to Kentucky. What do we know about him, and could he be the power forward of the future for Mark Pope's offense? And then to wrap up the show, something that I've been wanting to do for a while, we're going to be doing college football predictions. That's right, the biggest games of this weekend. We're going to be diving into them. Of course, our Kentucky versus South Carolina preview coming out later this week. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. And if you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Again, thank you guys so much for checking out the show today. Again, if you've not subscribed on YouTube or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. I believe that Jasper Johnson is about to be Pope's biggest ad of the 2025 recruiting class. In case you don't know, five-star shooting guard out of the Lexington area, originally going to be playing for OTE for his senior season, but the 6'4" combo guard has just been a phenomenal scorer throughout all of high school, and he is going to be announcing a commitment date tomorrow, 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time. This will not be open to the public. It's going to be taking place at Woodford County High School, and there are three options: Kentucky, North Carolina, and Alabama. The original plan, according to KSR, was to make the event open to the public, but with school happening at the same time and there being a significant demand from fans to attend, the safest option was to keep it private. So here we go. Five-star combo guard. I would play him at shooting guard. Going to end up choosing between these three schools: Wildcats, Tar Heels, and Crimson Tide. As things have been trending for a couple of weeks now, it looks like Kentucky's in the driver's seat here, and it's not all said and done officially, but it looks like Kentucky's going to end up grabbing him. It would be a shame, just a massive, massive shame for the Cats if they did not end up picking up this guy at the end of the day. And I think for their 2025 class, it's going to be really important for them to end up getting somebody that's as versatile of a scorer as Johnson is. We'll break that down in just a second, but in case you don't know anything about Johnson, he is exactly what I just said. He is an extremely versatile, aggressive, and confident scorer. He's got a great outside shot. He's a lefty. Is the form perfect? I wouldn't say it's perfect, but the shot goes in and he hits it at a pretty high volume. He's also really solid in the mid-range and just crafty in the lane and at the rim. Does a lot of damage in transition, pulling up for threes. Mark Pope is going to absolutely love that in his offense if Jasper does end up committing, which I expect him at this point to do so. It's not all over, but it's looking like Kentucky's really, really, really confident in where they currently stand. If you can pick some things up on the defensive end, this is beyond a shadow of a doubt a lottery pick in this upcoming 2025 NBA draft. Now, I hope that Jasper would find a way to stick around for another season with the Cats, but with the way that things are trending, with how talented he is, it's looking like this would be a one-and-done prospect for UK. Now, is that necessarily a bad thing to have one or two guys on your roster that end up doing so? I know a lot of you want massive change after what happened with Coach Cal and his coaching staff, bringing in one and done after one and done after one and done, filling entire rosters with freshman players, and then just sort of retooling the following season with new guys. It's okay to have guys like this come into your program because of just how talented they are. It's also really important as well if you can surround them with enough experience and enough talent to really make things go on offense and on defense without him. And I understand that there's going to be a lot of conversation about how Jasper improves in this area and that area, passing, defense, or whatever. But all I'm focused on right now is, look, and I've said this for a few months now, he's a score-first guard that can absolutely come in and average 15 plus in his first season in college basketball. He is that polished scoring. I don't really care if he becomes an elite defender. I don't really care if he becomes an elite passer. Pope's going to put guys in positions around him to become those things. He is going to provide enough off rip to be an extremely valuable player for the Cats. Now, would it be nice to see him get some of these extra things added to his game? Sure, but as far as I'm concerned, the man has a complete offensive package, and I could not be more excited with that. So again, announcing today, September 5th at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Going to be super, super excited about this one. Let's continue to talk here for a little bit about what Kentucky's future 2025 class could look like. And let's talk about a guy that's going to be taking an official visit here in just a couple of days. Before I dive into that, though, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. You can keep your ride or die alive over at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, continuing along here on the Wednesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you again. I really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. Let me know what you think about Jasper Johnson in the comments. If you're listening on podcast, first of all, thank you so much for tuning in. Leave a review if you like the show. If you don't, let me know why. At Locked On UK on Twitter, on socials. Would love to hear any thoughts that you got on Johnson, on Kentucky basketball. Obviously, Kentucky football, want to know after a solid half win over Southern Miss, 31-0. Kentucky only able to play essentially a half in that game. Recap of that matchup, by the way, is on the previous episode of Locked On Kentucky on your feed, wherever you are tuned in. So let's continue along here. Kentucky ending up, I believe, with Jasper Johnson. Fingers crossed, knock on wood, he ends up committing to the Cats. Let's say, for argument's sake, he does end up picking Kentucky. That pairs him then with four-star center and number one overall center in the 2025 class, Malachi Moreno, a kid from Great Crossing, Kentucky, in-state product, two in-state products that are fairly highly rated, I might add, to start off your 2025 class. I love that. Love that for Mark Pope and company to go after your in-state kids from the Lexington area, from the state period, and keep them in state. Obviously, you saw Kentucky prioritize that heavily during Mark Pope's limited time to recruit earlier this year. Travis Perry, Trent Noah, two guys from the states that you were able to bring in, and that will hopefully be valuable contributions later down the line. guys like Moreno and guys like Johnson are a little bit of a step above, I think, especially when it comes to projecting these guys out as NBA talents. These guys are going to be really special. Now, who could you pair alongside them in next year's class that you could get really fired up about? Well, I think Kentucky right now could legitimately put together a starting five and then a bench player with what could be just the perfect, ideal recruiting class. Now, just walk with me here for just a second. Let's hypothesize. Let me say this. Let's just spectate, okay, for a second. Let's just guess. I can't find the right word here. Let's just guess at what the perfect recruiting class for Kentucky would look like. I think it starts with your center and Malachi Moreno, 4-star prospect, again out of Kentucky. You end up getting Jasper Johnson. Same thing there, 5-star prospect out of the state. The next player I would go to is probably Mikel Brown Jr., who we spoke about on yesterday's episode. I believe he would be the perfect point guard for Mark Pope. I think he is the perfect point guard for what Mark Pope wants to do. Just another perfect cog in the wheel who can also score and pass and wants to play defense, which is something you don't really hear a lot out of these high-profile prospects. A lot of them just want to go out there and pretty much score. So you have your point guard, your shooting guard, your center. Where else would you go? Well, I think you go to Chris Cenac, which we'll talk about here in just a second, at your power forward spot, a 6'10" player. And then all you need is a wing. And the guy that I have continued to rave about on this show, 4-star Tunde Yesufu, may not have the shooting stroke that we want him to have at that small forward position, but I think you'll surround him with enough shooters where it's going to be okay. But Yesufu, just an extremely competitive and passionate player, physical on the wing at 6'5", 215 pounds. Love the energy that he brings to the table. He is a Mark Pope player, full stop. So you have Mikel Brown, Jasper Johnson, Tunde Yesufu, Chris Cenac, Malachi Moreno. Now, would all of those guys start? No, I don't think so. I think 2 of them would probably get the nod, and you could argue about the third. But the 6th man here is somebody that I'm also really fired up about. A recruiting battle between the Indiana Hoosiers and the Kentucky Wildcats in Braylon Mullins, a 4-star shooting guard, a guy that I think, frankly, is probably the best shooter in next year's class, at least for my money. So that's your 5-man starting lineup plus a 6-man. And no, I don't think all those guys could start. It's just really easy to kind of go down and pick one at each position. So what would next year's actual rotation possibly look like? In this hypothetical, just kind of being speculative here for a second, I think Mikel Brown would start at point. I think Travis Perry would back him up. Jasper Johnson at your starting shooting guard. Young backcourt, but talented. Colin Chandler backing Jasper Johnson up. Braylon Mullins also at shooting guard. I think Otega Owe would be the leader of this team, starting at small forward. Tunde Yesufu and Trent Noah backing him up. Chris Cenac at power forward. Nothing behind him at the 4, so you would need to go out and get a transfer portal power forward. Brandon Garrison at your center, who I would be thrilled with starting next year. And then Malachi Moreno, a high-floor center that can kind of help boost your front court. Maybe you get another center here to round out the 13-man scholarship. That is a good team. That is a very, very talented, good team. A nice blend, I might add, of young players, talented players, experienced players, physicality, shooting, rebounding. Cenac, we're going to get to here in just a moment, is a phenomenal rebounder. If you get maybe another point guard in your backcourt, somebody older, and you're able to get an extremely experienced power forward, that's a great roster. Mark Pope, in an ideal perfect world, gets all of these things to happen, or gets most of them to happen, and is able to kind of fill in the holes with some veteran transfers. This is exactly what I've been talking about when constructing a roster. You need a blend of everything. It's not just transfers. It's not just recruits. It's not just guys that are just right there in the middle as far as averages when it comes to college basketball. No, you need high-end talent, young or experienced. You need guys that have been in college for a while. You do need those guys. You need physicality. I think that is one thing that Kentucky sorely lacked a season ago. You need physical presences all around the court. And for Mark Pope's system, you need shooting. if you can get the blend, you start to look like a team like UConn, like a team like Duke. I think that you could really start to re-elevate yourself here to not just a top 10, but a top 5 program consistently with the system that Pope wants to run. It's going to be flashy. It's going to be fun. And I think the big selling point that I've been thrilled with Pope is him continuing to emphasize winning a championship at Kentucky. A lot of recruits, based on what they've said, seem to be pretty excited about that concept. Go and watch the videos that Kentucky's social media team is putting out right now with Lamont Butler talking about how the thing that he's most excited about doing is coming out here with Kentucky and winning. That's what he wants to do. Kobe Bryant winning and setting an example for the kids in New York that he used to play with and grew up watching the same Kentucky teams that he did. This team understands the assignment, and I can only assume the recruits that Kentucky brings in the future are also going to appreciate it and understand it as well. Thing I want to wrap up with the recruiting trail here. I just want to talk about this for a second. Chris Cenac, a 5-star power forward in the 2025 class, a 6'10", 210-pound player out of New Orleans, 5-star everywhere except for rivals. He's the number 13 player, number 4 power forward, and number 1 player out of Missouri, apparently, is where he is playing his high school ball in Link Academy. According to On3, he's the number 5 player. So On3, very, very high on him. 24/7 Sports has him as the 15th player. Kentucky has the 5th best odds to land this kid right now, according to On3's recruiting prediction machine, which is RPM. Kentucky at 11.9% with, 4th best odds, tied with Tennessee at 11.9%. Auburn at 14.2%. Houston at 22%, and LSU right now leading the way for a 5-star, 31.2%. What do we know about Chris Cenac? Well, first of all, he scheduled an official visit with Kentucky. He will actually be here with another player that we just talked about yesterday, a 6'3" point guard 5-star player, Mikel Brown Jr. Kentucky will host Ole Miss in football Saturday, September 28th, and Cenac and Brown will both be here to see that, the 27th and the 28th. Cenac, extremely talented down in the low post, excellent rebounder, and I mean phenomenal rebounder. There was a scouting report that I read that talked about how some players kind of get too cute at times when it comes to rebounding, and it's going to be interesting to see as he grows and plays against bigger competition, kind of how he approaches that. But as far as things go right now, he's aggressive and he's solid, and the fundamentals are absolutely there. On3's Jamie Shaw describes him as having a very high ceiling potentially as a two-way prospect, both on both sides of the floor. He's shown the ability to kind of have a little bit of a jumper. If he gets his feet set, he can knock down outside shots. That's all great, but here's what I'm kind of looking at. What do you notice about guys like Malachi Moreno, Jasper Johnson, and Chris Cenac? All 3 of them have something high floor that they can contribute to the team immediately. Malachi Moreno, as an overall prospect, does everything well. Not at an extremely insanely elite level, like an NBA level, but at a very, very solid level coming out of high school. He can rebound, he can defend, he can shoot a little bit, has all of these different moves in the post. Everything is played at a high floor level. Jasper Johnson, offensively, one of the most gifted scorers in this year's class. He has a very high floor on that end of the floor. Guys like Chris Cenac, of course you see the potential. Of course you see the opportunity to develop him into a little bit more of a polished, fluid player. But you see the fluidity already. You see the high floor. You see the rebounding. You see the post moves. You see the aggressiveness, the passion on the offensive end of the floor. Dunking with his ferocity, ferociously dunking. I can't speak here on today's episode. It's been kind of a rough few days here for me on the show, but nevertheless, we keep it pushing. Chris Cenac, though, I like the little things that he does. I like the rebounding, the defending, the post moves. You get to kind of see all these things that are comparative to the guy that they just landed in Malachi Moreno. Get those 2 in the front court together next season, and I think that they could do very, very special things. Again, Cenac visiting the weekend of September 27th and 28th with another player in Mikel Brown Jr., somebody that I really, really want Kentucky to take a strong look at. Okay, let's wrap up the show doing something I've wanted to do for a hot minute here, and that is take a look at some college football predictions for this weekend. I'm going to go through some of the biggest games of the week and kind of give my quick predictions on all of them. Before we dive into that, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. It is America's #1 sportsbook. We have something a little different here for you today because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. With the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel literally any time. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. Again, that is FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, wrapping up the Wednesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Let's do some picks, and I would encourage you guys, if you're listening on YouTube, if you're listening on podcast, share me your picks for this weekend because, boy, howdy, we got some big games this weekend, some games that I'm thinking a little differently on when it comes to maybe some upsets here. We'll start at the top with the biggest game of the week, according to everyone, and that is Texas, #3 Texas, on the road at #10, Michigan. Michigan started a former walk-on at quarterback over Alex Orji in week 1. They did not look great against Fresno State. 1-0 according to ESPN's ESPN's Pick'em. 84% of people out there believe that the Longhorns are going to win this game. I think Texas will end up winning this game, but I do want to point out something here. Texas, I don't think, is as physical on the interior and as strong in the trenches as most people just naturally expect them to be. Sure, there's a lot of talent on paper, but they did lose some guys on the defensive line to the draft this past season, and they're going up against a team that still knows how to pound the rock and just absolutely bludgeon you up front, if that's the proper word to use there. I'm going to take Texas, but I think it's going to be a little bit of a rock fight. I think it's going to be ugly. Whether or not either of these teams can run or throw the ball, I think may end up being kind of irrelevant. The biggest thing here is just going into the big house and trying to keep up with the physicality across the board with the Michigan Wolverines. I think Texas at the very end finds a way to do it and picks up a really, really big win on the road to start what is a very early SEC career for the Longhorns. Okay, game 2, Arkansas on the road at #16, Oklahoma State. We saw what happened last year with the Pokes early on. Just couldn't get things going offensively. Were blown out by South Alabama at home. Yes, they churned things around towards the end of the season. Yes, they are currently one of the favorites to win the Big 12. Arkansas on a downward trend over these past couple of years with Sam Pittman. Taylon Green absolutely looked the part as a runner and a thrower in a blowout 70-0 win over Arkansas Pine Bluff. I'm going to take the Razorbacks. I don't really know if I trust Oklahoma State's consistency, just given how they've operated in the Big 12 and then also out of conference, as we mentioned with South Al earlier. I just don't know if I trust them to go and get a win against what I still think is a middling SEC program that has a lot of talent at the skill positions, has a good offensive coordinator, and a quarterback that I think may end up being a little bit more special than we currently realize. I'm going to take the Hogs on the road. Keep it close, though. Georgia Tech and Syracuse. This is right about the time of the season that Georgia Tech drops a couple of games in a row after upsetting two major opponents after upsetting a major opponent. They are ranked number 23rd now, 2-0, heading to Syracuse. Syracuse was not able to stop a nosebleed against Ohio, allowed over 230 yards rushing on the ground against the Bobcats. Actually might have been closer to 250 if I'm not mistaken. That's bad. That's bad, especially considering Ohio is supposed to be one of the worst teams in the MAC this year. There are reasons to take Georgia Tech to lose this game, like historical reasons. I'm going to take the Yellow Jackets, and I don't feel great about it, but on paper, they should be able to ground and pound their way to a victory. Pittsburgh at Cincinnati. Cincinnati becoming essentially a doormat ever since Scott Satterfield took over. Pittsburgh figured out how to play a little offense in week 1. Will that translate to a Big 12 team now in the Bearcats? I think Pitt goes on the road and wins this game. Frankly, I don't think it's going to end up being that close. I just don't really trust where Cincinnati is as a program right now. A game that I think is going to be super, super fun. Iowa State versus number 21 Iowa. Guys, we made this a bit last year with Cade McNamara and the Hawkeyes and the point tracker with Brian Ferentz. All of this good stuff, right? With Iowa and just how they weren't able to score. And here they are now, 40 points in after a week 1 victory. And it's got some Hawkeye fans feeling like they're on top of the world and they cannot be beaten. Iowa State and Iowa are two of the most physical teams in the country. Like, if you're going to give me like a top 25 and it's just the most physical teams, you got to put Iowa State and Iowa in the top 15 at least, I think. Cyclones, though, maybe dealing with some inconsistencies on offense, only scored 21 points in their season opener themselves. Another rock fight, another game that I think is going to be really fun and competitive if you're into some really ugly football. I'm going to take Iowa to win this one at home because the Hawkeyes typically win this one in this rivalry. Then we've got Tennessee versus the NC State Wolfpack. Grayson McCall at home after a rough game against Western Carolina. Tennessee looked incredible in their week 1 game. I think it was against Chattanooga. I may be wrong on that. Nico, forget how to pronounce his last name. I believe it's Yamaliva or Yami. It's Nico. I don't have the name right in front of me, and I apologize to Tennessee fans if you're watching this. Actually, no, I don't apologize to you. I'm going to take Tennessee to win this game. I don't want to. You know why I don't want to. Look at the podcast you're watching right now. But for the sake of getting picks right, I think Tennessee is just simply a much better team on offense. I agree with our host, Locked On Vols host, Eric Kane, when I say that I think they're just better across the board at skill positions, and I think that Tennessee ends up winning this game by at least 14 points. That's my opinion. Colorado on the road at Nebraska. Ooh, this should be a fun one. Colorado has won 3 games in a row in this series. Deion Sanders picking up a dub last year to kind of get people hyped up about them, people hyped up about the Buffs early on a season ago. I'm going to take Nebraska to win this game. Dylan Raiola looked incredible throwing the ball downfield in week 1. Colorado's secondary absolutely burnt, just toast. I don't expect them to keep up with Nebraska in the passing game, or at least on the defensive side of the ball. Shiloh Sanders you may see some lowlights there. Whereas when you look on the offensive side of the ball, with the other Sanders at quarterback, I think Colorado's going to be able to put up points in this game. I think they're going to be able to throw the ball around, but their defense is just not going to be able to hang on at the end of the day. Texas Tech on the road at Washington State. This is a weird one, but I wanted to talk about this one, and it's on ESPN for a reason. Give me Texas Tech and Joey McGuire to kind of step up here and start to pick things up during his first couple of seasons with the Red Raiders. Going on the road and beating what is still an okay Washington State team, kind of wearing that Pac-12 list schedule this year. Kind of weird how they've done this. It's almost like they're in independent at this point, but we'll see what happens with them in Oregon State. And then the final game here, which is just another weird one. I don't understand this one at all. Mississippi State on the road at Arizona State. This was a part of a home that started last year. What is going on here? I don't know. A lot of people are low, like really low on Mississippi State and Jeff Lebby in year 1. Give me the Bulldogs. I think the Bulldogs go bowling this year. That was one of my bold predictions. I think they get 6 or 7 wins and they shock some people. Texas A&M, I'm looking at you later on down the line. I think this is another game that they could end up winning. So those are my college football picks for the week. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let me know what your picks are as well. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Have a great rest of your day, and God bless.